implications of this. Once the report issues, the time to petition for vote is short. Failure to develop a consensus among at least the governing bodies and districts seeking dissolution could result in answers from those bodies or districts that undermine the case for approving the vote. The next step is that the State Board of Review grants or opposes the vote. Procedures for this. The Commissioner of Education will submit the petition and answers to a State Board of Review that he will constitute. That board will consist of the Commissioner of Education, a member of the State Board of Education, the State Treasurer or his designee, and, in a mouthful, the Director of the Division of Local Government in the Department of Consumer Affairs. Continuing with what the review board does. They will determine the amount of the indebtedness to be assumed, and I left the word out, by the constituent districts. They will consider the effect of dissolution upon educational and financial condition of the constituent districts. They will schedule and hold a public hearing upon application of any interested party. And then they will consent or oppose to the application for a vote. So continue with what they do, and this is how they decide on how to grant or oppose the vote. So they consent to the vote, that's one option, or they oppose the vote for some specific reasons. They decide that there would be an excessive debt burden imposed upon any of the constituent districts. They determine that an efficient school district cannot be maintained in the constituent districts without excessive cost. One that I don't think would apply, that there would be insufficient pupils. And any other reason that the board may deem sufficient. Some of the implications of this. Again, keeping conflicting answers to the petition to a minimum may be critical to gaining permission to put the issue to a vote. The focus on efficiencies makes the review board support for simply splitting the regional high school into 2 regions with constituent districts remaining the same unlikely, as that increases the number of districts and administrative costs. The 2 Mendhams and the 2 Chesters will very likely have to work together to form a K-12 district. If the review board grants the right to have a vote, it's only if they get to that point, the procedure is, and the voting procedure really is, that there has to be an affirmative vote in a majority of the individual constituent districts, and there has to be an affirmative vote of a majority of the overall votes in the entire district. So the implications of this. 3 of the 4 districts will need to approve it. With Washington Township having 48% of the overall voters as of the last census, no votes in the remaining districts must be kept to a minimum unless a significant number of Washington Township voters are convinced of the value to them. The likely requirement of 2 K-12 districts instead of 2 high school districts means that the voters in each of the Mendham districts and the Chester district will need to be convinced to surrender local control of their K-8 district. Work needs to begin on making that case. Evidencing an ability to work with other towns will be crucial. So that's the option of dissolving the district. The final option is one that's been discussed, and that's a legislative fix. And I'm sure Mr. Merck can help me with the sausage that will be made here. But the basics are pretty well known to everybody. We're going to have to obtain the sponsorship of the bill by one of our assemblymen and Senator Bucco in the Assembly and Senate, respectively. We're going to have to provide a basis for a majority of the Assembly members and senators to support it, and we're going to have to get the governor to sign it. So what are the implications of that? An Assembly member and a senator will need to be convinced that any legislation is supported by a clear majority of their constituents. We will need to work with them and all the constituent municipalities to develop a proposal that garners the necessary support. To restate the obvious, a common element for success, regardless of the option followed, is working with most, if not all, of the constituent municipalities to develop a solution acceptable to their residents and the State Review Board. Your advance agenda tonight proposed an executive session discussion of a moderator for future mayor meetings. I see that it has been removed, but I will still address it, as it has direct bearing on working with other towns. Ideally, the candidate would be a Mendham Township resident who knows the high school from several vantage points, such as having been a student, parent of a student, and a taxpayer only with no children in the school. Also, ideally, that person would have demonstrated support not only from our town, but from the constituent municipalities as well. Fortunately, that ideal person exists in Christine Myers. She went to Mendham High School and has a son there now. She knows well the importance of maintaining and improving upon its historically high standards. Her son graduates next spring, so she and her husband now face the prospect of paying more than their fair share of the regional school budget without receiving a direct benefit. Despite the obvious conflict that her Mendham Township residency might present and its potential impact on them, the mayors of the other 4 towns recognized her abilities and agreed, along with Mayor Ciopatini, to have her serve as moderator. Finally, she received the support of many residents in Mendham Township and the other 4 towns in last year's freeholders election. In short, she is a person who understands Mendham Township's issues and who has demonstrated acceptance by the other towns. Based on all these factors, I can only assume that your executive session discussion would have been about ensuring that she continues in her role of facilitating future meetings. Finally, with regard to Mr. Gagliardi, I would be happy to repeat my presentation for other audiences willing to endure it. In this way, the expenses of his services, at least for this topic, may be avoided. More importantly, please be aware of what Mr. Gagliardi is and his economic incentives if you consider hiring him. He is a litigator. He will make far more money if litigation results than he will as an advisor. If at some point it becomes important to obtain the advice from a litigator, it may at some point become important to obtain the advice from a litigator, but the roles of advisor and, if ultimately necessary, a litigator should be kept separate. Mr. Gagliardi might make an excellent choice as an advisor on education-related litigation. His resume indicates a wealth of experience in this area. However, if he is retained to provide advice, it should be clear to him from the outset that he will never be retained for the litigation. That will be the only way to make sure that advice is unvarnished and not just a justification for proceeding with litigation, where he would make the bulk of his money, win or lose. Some of the areas where you and our citizens will want unvarnished advice are as follows. How many applications for funding formula changes, withdrawal, or dissolution have ever been made? How many have resulted in a successful outcome for the applicant? How many have resulted in litigation? And how many of those cases, once fully concluded, have the applicant succeeded? What facts need to be in place for success? And do those facts exist here? How long has the litigation lasted? How much should we expect to spend on litigation? Not only on the lawyer, but also on accountants, education experts, and other experts. In short, we will need to know our chances for success and the cost of the effort, and we will want that advice to come from someone who has no interest in tilting the table towards litigation. So again, if you choose a lawyer as an advisor, please make clear to him from the outset that neither he nor his firm will represent us in any litigation. Thank you for indulging my overly long remarks. I hope you will agree that it was worth the time to follow up on Mayor Ciopatini's excellent suggestion that we need to know the process so that we can chart a course most likely to succeed. Thank you again.
Thank you. Mayor? Sure. I just want to address the issue of Mr. Gagliardi. Prior to, I think, any of these people being a member of the board, Mr. Gagliardi had come in on a no-charge basis to meet with the towns to discuss what is involved and outline very similar to what you have outlined here. At the time, we could not get the majority of towns to sign on to go to the next step. But I also believe he has just been appointed by the governor, and I don't know the exact title, but something to do with the Abbott school districts and construction in the Abbott school districts. So I don't know if that would have any effect at all on his ability to work in these areas. But I have met him. He's a very nice man, very, very knowledgeable. And he did, on a pro bono basis, come in and spend some time with us explaining the